I had read some early drafts of it, but we didn't really talk about music too much. It was more just to sort of like so I know what it was, know what the story was, and then we really got going March of 2017 when he started prepping. So it was
So like right after you guys won the Oscars.
there were a few weeks of decompression, I guess, and then we got going on it. But yeah, so it was a few months before he moved to Atlanta to really start. I mean, it was when he was started working with production design, locations, costumes, all that. When his process started and all that, I just started working on the music with him, and he likes to figure out a lot of as much music as possible before he shoots. It's good for me too because I like to know what the themes are. That's the hardest and most frustrating part for me is just searching for the right themes. And he loves themes. He's very into like a melodic sensibility. I mean, maybe he'll make a movie at some point that doesn't have a melodic score, but so far he's really wanted that. So just like searching for the right themes and melodies, that is something I need to do. I need to have the time to do that, and he really wants to know what those are. And then he likes a lot of music created before he shoots the movie. I think maybe that's because of the movies we've made, because they were musicals or movies where you did need pre-records, and he liked to actually have music made. I think maybe because that was part of his process, he wanted to approach certain parts of the movie that way. Mainly kind of some of the set pieces or some of the action things, he wanted actual demos made. So we could storyboard to them, and so that he could work with Linus, the cinematographer, to some of the music, and so we could have it on set. So there was a lot of pre-production work, and then they were off shooting, and I was, figuring some other things out, some sonic stuff for the score, and then they got back, and that's really when most of the cues happen is in post, when you can actually see the picture, but certain scenes where we made a lot of stuff before he shot.
So what were the specific themes that he had in mind when you first started talking about it?
Well, the first thing was the main melody. He wanted a main theme melody, and he wanted it to be kind of a lyrical melody, and he wanted it to... I'd read 2 drafts of the script at that point, and then he had just started throwing a lot of words at me, what it needed to feel like and what it needed to do, and grief, pain. The movie's about Neil and Janet and their family dealing with loss of their daughter, and then loss of some very close friends and colleagues along the way, and dealing with that, and moving forward, and a lot of that loss fueled Neil, and even when he got to the end, and we all know what the end is, this incredible achievement, it's weighing on him, and it's really sort of underpinning a lot of what he's going through on the mission, on the Apollo 11 mission. So that melody, he needed to know what that was. So that was just, at the piano demo, sending a lot to Damien. That's what we've kind of done since the first movie, is just sending piano demos to him. So we figured that out. It took a while, and then the next piece of material he wanted was, we call it, it's kind of the family piece of material. It's this sort of triplets ostinato, and so we call it the riff. That's just sort of how we refer to it. So we had the melody, and then he was like, okay, now let's figure out the riff. And so that was piano demos, and we talked a little bit about how they would operate separately, and then they would come together in the landing cue, and that was one of the main cues that he really wanted created before he shot the movie. Of course, we were reshaping it later to the picture, but he wanted to storyboard do it, and he wanted it on set. And it was also, he likes, in the editing room, it gets him and Tom Cross going to have a piece of music to cut to. So we had the melody, we had the riff, and then the landing is the main piece of music that really puts those together. We put them together one time in the quarantine cue. They kind of come together once more, but so it started with that idea of those 2 pieces of music, figuring them out independently, and then putting them together and and then we started talking about arrangement and instruments and creating an actual mock-up for that cue, the landing, and then there were a couple more themes, but those actually didn't happen until post-production, and that was sort of, we thought like we could get away with just 2 pieces of material. We thought, well, we have a theme and kind of a secondary subordinate theme, and we'll just like twist them and use them different ways and disguise them, and we can probably score the whole movie with versions of these two pieces of material. And the first week of editing, the first scene, the first like picture he gave me this sequence that became this on the soundtrack. It's called the contingency statement cue, and he gave me the scene, and he said, "Okay, so we have the scene. We just start cutting the scene, and none of our themes work. You need we tried both of them; they don't work. It needs to be something different." So, and that's like an exciting part of the process too, because you do all this like planning, and then you get picture, and that's when the job really starts happening, where it's like you realize what you really need, and so we had to create that piece of material, which we used one other place, and then really, really late in the game, it was like a week before the orchestra sessions. So we'd been working for about, I guess a year and a few months at that point, and we decided, the movie's short one theme. So it was the kind of work NASA theme, I guess the work theme you would call it. It's this sort of slightly militaristic and slightly bluesy thing that sort of it's another kind of riff-based piece of material that kind of has a drive to it, and it's all the NASA scenes and all the training scenes basically. And yeah, we just found later, I think, we need one more thing. So
just more work for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's funny how it's like no matter how much time is left, it gets done. It's like at the beginning of the process. When it's like you have so long, it's months until they're even shooting the movie. It's like you spend forever at the piano, and like I said, that's like the most frustrating time for me, because it's like I just sit there searching for what seems like forever, and then late in the process you have like a week left, and it somehow gets done. So
that is the worst. But you also used a theremin in the score, which I've never seen in person, but it's an instrument you don't touch to play. But it also creates this like haunting warble, which I thought worked so well with to illustrate his grief. So when did that come into the picture, and how familiar were you with it?
I knew what it was. I'd never played one. Damien suggested that again during pre-production. That was kind of the next phase. So there was the real composition, like at the piano, what are the melodies, basically that part of it. And then as soon as we settled on those, then it was okay, let's talk about instruments and sounds and the sonics of it all. And he very quickly threw out theremin, so I got one. I started playing around with it, and like I said, I knew of it. I guess my associations were the same as his associations and probably most people's, which is like sci-fi, 50s, 60s, a lot of campy sci-fi. And but what Damien wanted to explore with it is, can we use it in a way that's more emotional than we're used to hearing it? We don't want it to sound, we're not using it for the sake of weirdness and alienness, although it has that quality inherently in it. It's how do we use it really expressively, and the way you may use, a solo violin or a voice or something, and it has those qualities of those instruments or a voice in it as well. And that's what I that was what I discovered when I started playing it, which is how expressive it can be, and how you can give anything a vibrato, and you're always like sliding into notes. You kind of have to slide through notes unless you unless you kind of kill the volume in between the notes. You're kind of always sliding into all the notes, so it just has this very like expressive human-like quality. It's responding to every little motion. There's no lag. There's no mechanics in between you and it. There are no with a piano, there's so many pieces in between. You press the key and then there are 50 pieces that move together, and still a piano is so expressive. But here it's just like responding exactly to what you're doing. And so I found you can give it this real sort of human quality. It's, like I said, very voice-like, and it's kind of this weird intersection between technology and humanity, which is an interesting sort of
it's a story
idea. Yeah, exactly. So It just felt right, and we started using it to play the main theme, the main melody. That's what we started using the theremin for, and then used it pretty sparingly, at least in a very like out front melodic way. In fact, we don't. It's kind of in all of the cues for the most part, like playing the little counter melody here and there, but we save it to play the real, to really out front melody until the Apollo 11 mission in the last half an hour of the movie, and then we let it really kind of sing and that's kind of the shape of the whole score. We wanted it to be really contained and really intimate, and sort of grow as we get closer and closer to that mission, and then kind of blossom as that mission is starting. And that's where we let the theremin really lead and play really emotionally in those cues.
For the launch and the landing sequences, like they're obviously big and majestic scores, but there's also kind of like a melancholy quality to it, like from the theremin. But were there any, I guess, like space music tropes that you wanted to avoid, because it's so different from the usual type of music you hear for those types of films?
I mean, we talked about certain things that we knew we didn't want to do, like we didn't want to use choir for any of it, and I guess we did talk about how choir is often used in space, but again, we got similar qualities from the theremin, which has more of a solo voice quality than a choir, but it has humanity. It has sort of a voice like humanity in it. So that was a way to get a similar vibe. And then we also wanted to avoid some of the really happy, fanfare, triumphant. I mean, you mentioned the launch, and that's where the brass, it's the cue right before that, and then the launch where we really start introducing the brass and the full orchestra, the full weight of the orchestra. And there is definitely a triumph in it, but there's also a pain in it. And there's a loneliness in it, because Neil has said goodbye to his family. He doesn't know if he's ever going to see them again. They don't know if they're ever going to see their dad and husband again. And there's a real pain in all of that, and in the sacrifice of all of that. And so we wanted the music to get big and exciting, and there's a certain amount of triumph to it, but it also had to have some real pain in it. So I'd say that's the way that we were maybe trying to stay away from how other space movies have scored the launch, the big moments.
Mm-hmm. Was it more difficult to score like the bigger moments, like the launch and the landing, or the more intimate moments, like all the family sequences?
The intimate moments were by far the hardest parts of the score. I mean, the big cues they take a long time, just in terms of, because they're very wide cues. So like just figuring it all out and figuring out the voicings and orchestrating it all, it's like they take time. But in terms of, we actually were more like confident about those cues in terms of like knowing that they were working with the picture. It was the intimate cues where there was just so much trial and error, and like screenings every week. For all of post, we were together. We did a thing that we started last movie where I get my office next to the editing room, so we're all together for the whole post. So we're working on stuff together, but then every week we do a friends and family screening, we do screenings for the studio, we do actual preview screenings, and just like always trying to figure out, is it spotted right? Is it the instrumentation right? Is it all of that stuff? And it was those intimate cues. It was all that like family stuff, the domestic stuff, the really quiet cues where there was so much trial and error in terms of what material we're using, what instrumentation, what exactly where it's spotted, because those scenes are so delicate, and he so much of the movie is made in this kind of like verite documentary style, and it needed music. Damien and Tom felt these scenes needed music, but the music couldn't intrude, and it couldn't it had to have a very, very light touch. Mm-hmm. So there was those cues, there was more back and forth trial and error than the big cues, where we just kind of were like, it's going to be big and loud, and we sort of knew more of what we were doing there from the beginning.
Well, you've worked exclusively with Damien. You've scored all of 4 of his films. So do you foresee that continuing, just working exclusively with him, or would you like to work with other directors or branch out?
I think he and I hopefully will keep working together in terms of working with other filmmakers. I'd like to. I'm open to it in theory. I haven't really had the opportunity because we went, from La La Land into this. So now is actually the first time that he's not gonna, he's writing his next movie and he's at the beginning of that research and writing process. So it's gonna be a while before he makes something. So I actually do have a window, so I'm sort of open to it, but I haven't found a person or a project yet, and I think it would be a good thing for me to do, but I also am very nervous about it because he and I have a sort of connection and a rapport that is I've gotten very used to, just a whole working process that works for both of us, and it's not very typical in a lot of ways how we do it, and maybe I have to adapt to other processes, and I probably should. That'd be good for me too, but I just need to look, keep looking for the right thing, and maybe I'll find it.
So are you working on anything now?
No, I'm completely unemployed now.
So someone hire him right now.
I'm doing little things for this movie. Like I just got asked to adapt a couple of the cues as like a concert thing, as a live piece. So I did that this last week, and then I'm like editing sheet music folios and stuff for it. Or really, kind of like, editing, I guess, would be the publishers do it, and then I look at it and I give notes and go back and forth. So doing like little things like that, but I have nothing to score.
You can take a break right now.
I've been practicing the theremin a little bit because I actually want to be better at it. I learned it. I did it just well enough to like play the melodies I needed to play, and I used it with very, very improper technique. Like I was just waving my whole hand at it. I wasn't doing any of the like finger, movements. So I was just like waving my hand and doing many, many takes until I got it like good enough. And now like since I'm done, I actually like. I watched this documentary with Clara Rockmore, who was like the theremin player, and I was like, oh wow, I'll obviously never be that good, but I want to be better at it. I'd like to at least know the proper technique. So I've been practicing a little bit every day.
You're gonna be the theremin expert, and then your next movie is just gonna be all theremin.
Maybe. No, I don't know if I should use it again, but I would like to at least know how to play it the right way. So I should probably find some new hobbies too. I do have time now.